I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead-zinc-silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic engineer gold mine in the Atlan District of Northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Bob Mackin. He's an award-winning investigative reporter and publisher of TheBreaker.News, his website, TheBreaker.ca. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
Politicians in droves, especially mayors in the Lower Mainland, do not plan to run for re-election this fall. Why are so many, almost a dozen now, have said they won't seek re-election? Why have they decided not to face the voters again?
Well, we're hoping some of them will open up and spill the beans and tell us exactly why. A variety of them so far have said, they want to spend more time with their family, and they want to spend more time on their health and enjoy life, and who doesn't want to, really? And politics can be taxing. Of course, they're taxing us, and they feel taxed themselves. I think one of the big problems is this new system we have, the 4-year terms. In 2014, when we elected municipal politicians for the first time, it was for 4-year terms. Previously, it had been for 3-year terms. What it meant was that they got more power and we got less. It took us until, it's taking us until this year. October 20th is when we go back to the polls to vote our mayors, councillors, school board trustees, and in some places park board commissioners. We'll get a chance to do that in October, but with so many incumbents leaving, it does raise a lot of questions. And these people are realizing perhaps that even though they got 1 extra year of power, 1 extra year of paychecks, maybe it's not as pleasant as they had hoped it would be, especially since this is a different Lower Mainland than it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We're in a time of massive change with increased population, increased immigration, increased money from overseas, and we're seeing our communities go through technological change. All you have to do is go to stores where there's lots of stores and shopping malls or main streets and see the various empty, vacant storefronts that used to be full for a variety of reasons, including high taxes, but also because of changing retail and changing tastes among consumers. That business is having a hard time. We're going more digital. Amazon and other companies are taking over to deliver directly to us after buying on e-commerce. And when you use e-commerce, those aren't local people in your community that you're buying from. So there are massive changes in business, in the residential world, where we're seeing our communities change. We're seeing a lot of people move out and cash out. We're seeing the baby boomers go elsewhere. We're seeing young families go elsewhere because of affordability, and that's a major issue, the affordability crisis in the Lower Mainland, because property values going so sky high, because of a large amount of foreign investment that has come in and really disrupted the market, and that has had its ripple effects in these mayors' offices. That we're to the point that if they wanted to run again, they'd be wondering who they'd be running against, but more or less who they'd be running to get to vote for them. We saw last year with the provincial election at a time of change where Surrey became the place where the election was really decided. It used to be the traditional bellwether being Kamloops, that if you won Kamloops, you'd win government. Well, the BC Liberals won Kamloops, but it was really the NDP that won the majority seats in Surrey and was able to take away that majority from the BC Liberals and then pair themselves with the Greens to take over the government. And part of that was because both parties, although more or less the Liberals, didn't know who was living in the communities anymore. I had some sources who told me that some campaign managers in the Liberals compared their 2013 databases with what they had in 2017, and they found out that half the people that they knew who they were and where they lived in 2013, according to their database, no longer were there anymore. The phone numbers weren't working for a variety of reasons. Maybe they got new phone numbers and gone somewhere else, but more or less they had gone somewhere else. They had gone elsewhere, and they've been largely replaced by people who are new Canadians who either don't have their citizenship yet, or were so new that they maybe just have a 10-year visa and don't come here very often. And you got a lot of empty houses, and empty houses don't include voters. So I think that situation, this time of great change in the Lower Mainland and this demographics is a major, major issue. And then the third issue is that the authorities are starting to pay more attention to what goes on in our communities, federal authorities and provincial authorities. We're awaiting, as we wait today, as we talk now, for Attorney General David Eby to release the Peter German report on money laundering in casinos. He received that last week, and when he received it, he said he'd given the green light to Peter German to do another report on the impacts of money laundering on real estate. And that's where things are going. And we've seen Canada Revenue Agency take interest in some very expensive neighborhoods in West Vancouver. They want to find out who owns the property and where the money came from. There's international pressure for countries in the G8 to crack down on money laundering and tax evasion because money is moving around the world pretty quickly, and that's a major concern here in the Lower Mainland with all this money that's come over from China. So the question that I have is, are these mayors getting cold feet because they know that there's extra eyes on them now? We saw what happened in Quebec with the corruption in the construction industry, which really was more of a municipal story than a provincial government story. And that looked at the impact, it got down to brass tacks and looked at the impact of political donations on politicians influencing their decisions. Well, until the end of last year, we had a Wild West system here in British Columbia where it was anything goes. You could donate as much money as you wanted to as many candidates as you wanted, and it didn't matter if you're a Canadian or not. Well, now there are new laws that limit the donations. There's a cap on the donations, and if you're a corporate or a union, you can't donate anymore. And if you're not Canadian, you can't donate anymore. There is an allowance for permanent residents to donate, but the influence on elections by big money is on the way out. So the politicians who want to run again this fall won't be able to rely on that easy money anymore, unless, of course, they banked a lot of it last fall, and there's some evidence that some politicians did. And then the other aspect is campaign technology. For those who won in 2014 with campaigns that relied heavily on social media, they cannot use that playbook again in 2018 because of news that has unfolded in the last several weeks and is going to continue to unfold for the rest of the year, talking mainly about the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal, which involves a company out of Victoria called Aggregate IQ. So there's a real push on for regulation of social media and for a crackdown on the dirty tricks that we've seen. We saw the dirty tricks in the United States involving Russians that the FBI has cracked down on. Well, some of that was also happening up here in other elections, including the 2014 civic elections, and that won't be able to happen again because people are smarter about that and can spot when they're being lied to quicker. And so the type of campaign, the budgets for campaigns, the voters, the politicians' reluctance to stay in the game, all is coming together. And I think in the months to come, we're going to see some clarity. I know that there is, at least in the city of Vancouver, an RCMP investigation looking at one of the land deals in downtown Vancouver, the land swap for the social housing with a luxury tower, and there could be more in the Lower Mainland. We'll see if anything does turn into anything that we saw in Quebec, where we actually saw mayors being handcuffed and frog-marched out of their city halls.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after the break.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE, symbol CRL, and the Pink, symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, there's been an interesting BC Supreme Court ruling on whether you can sue a political party or not. What happened there, and what does it mean?
Well, remember that big ad campaign the BC Liberals were running, the Our Opportunity is Here campaign. I think you saw it, listeners saw it, we saw a lot of it. Watching Canucks games, watching TV news. It started in November 2015 and ran all the way through the lead up to the 2017 election. And a couple of lawyers, Paul Doroshenko and David Fay, filed on behalf of David Trapp, who was a man in his 60s, a retired network analyst from TransLink. He had enough. He was someone who said that he had gone through cancer treatments and had seen how, from the inside, how hospitals need more support, more funding. But then he turned on his TV and kept on seeing these ads. And every time one of those ads was seen on TV, that was money that wasn't being put into the medical health system. And he saw it for what it was, that the BC Liberals were doing what the NDP had done in the 1990s with what the Socreds had done in the 1980s. And he didn't want to see it anymore, that this was a waste of money, and this was really an ad campaign that was strategically designed to benefit not the people of the province, but the governing party. In the end, it didn't work because they fell out of power, but it did let them get into the election campaign on our dollar without having to spend their dollars. The Liberals had raised well over $30 million in the years before then, and it was the position of David Trapp, the citizen, that they had enough money to buy their own ads without burdening taxpayers, and they should have done that themselves. But if they weren't going to do that, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, so why not ask the courts to order the BC Liberals to refund the public treasury for all the money that was wasted on the ads? Well, it was an interesting proposition. The BC government, even though it changed to the NDP, sent some lawyers to contest this, and so did the BC Liberals, and the BC Liberals were able to convince Justice Ward Branch to put a halt to this lawsuit, that this lawsuit had no merit to go forward because how it was framed, it could not go forward because of a 1987 Superior Court ruling out of Ontario that said that political parties are like trade unions. They have no legal existence. They are unincorporated associations, and therefore we can't sue them, which seems like such an outlandish notion, but that's how the law says, and often they say the law is an ass, and in this case, the lawyers who were involved with this, Paul Doroshenko and David Fay, must agree. I interviewed Paul Doroshenko, and he's shaking his head at this because he argued in court when they had a hearing in February that political parties really should be considered legal entities. You know, these are entities that have to be registered. They got to be registered with the government to be political parties. They've got to state their assets and liabilities every year to Elections BC. They have to have a financial agent. They have to have an auditor. They're governed by expense limits and other laws. They really are animals that do have some sort of legal existence because they have to exist under laws and toe the line on laws. But no, the government said they don't. And so that put an end to this lawsuit, which was a real surprise to Paul Doroshenko. that political parties can't be held accountable, especially political parties who get into power and become government and then start spending taxpayer dollars. The Justice branch on this, he also ruled that the money, the provincial tax dollars that the plaintiff in this case wanted returned to the taxpayers could not be deemed as goods of the plaintiff, because once you pay your taxes and the money gets into government coffers, it becomes the government's property. That's what the judge said. And he acknowledged that public officials sometimes make bad decisions on spending, but that's the way it is. And taxpayers really don't have control over how government funds are spent. But one thing, though, he did near the end of his written judgment, which was released April 10th, Justice Branch did offer 4 alternative means for the plaintiff to go about righting the wrong. In this case, one of those remedies was already used last year to vote out the party that performed the wrongful acts in an election. That was done last year, but there's 3 other remedies that the lawyers in this are seriously considering. They could launch proceedings under the Election Act. They could, there could be a criminal prosecution for breach of trust under the criminal code, or a claim for malfeasance in public office. They'd either have to convince the police and the Crown Counsel to lay charges, or they could try to go through it with a private prosecution or file another lawsuit. We'll have to see what they do. They're keeping their cards close to their chest, but they're not giving up. Paul Doroshenko, the lawyer, one of the 2 lawyers involved in this, is determined not to give up on this, because this is what he said got him into politics to begin with. He volunteered on Gordon Campbell's BC Liberal campaigns in 2001 and later on, because he was motivated by seeing how the NDP was wasting money in the 1990s, and Gordon Campbell said he was going to stop it. And to a large part, Campbell did fulfill that promise. There were times when he didn't. There were ads that were done to position BC and make the British Columbians happy to live in British Columbia. Remember the old slogan, BC, the best place on earth? It was all about leading into the Olympics and making us feel good about being British Columbians and feel good about letting the Liberals spend that money. It got worse under the Clark Liberals, because Gordon Campbell had a more pre-election moratorium for 4 months before elections on advertising, where Christy Clark never lived up to that. She wanted to use more and more public funds to advertise on the lead-up to the election as close to the line as she could go, even though she was someone in the 1990s who, while in opposition, slammed the NDP for its waste. She turned around and wasted times 10. So here we are with an NDP government, which is already early on spending a lot of money, millions of dollars on ads, including ads for ICBC, which can't afford to buy ads. We've been told that ICBC is close to being insolvent, but no, ICBC is spending money on ads anyways. And some of these campaigns for the recent budget and some of the budgetary measures to try to fix the housing inaffordability situation were contracted out to a company that's very close to the NDP, a company called Now Communications Group, which actually was formed out of the Harcourt campaign team in 1992. They're getting ad contracts, and one of their former executives now works inside the government in government communications. And there's one word that we talked a lot about in the 1990s when this happened. It was patronage, and it looks like it and smells like it again.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the pink CYDVF, and on Frankfurt C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin Bob, no matter which way the pipeline debate goes in BC, it seems to me the lawyers are going to be the big winners on this. Will we ever find out how much the Burnaby government, the Vancouver government, the BC provincial government spent on legal bills trying to fight something that Ottawa probably will do its very best to push through? And how much is Ottawa spending on lawyers?
That's a good question. We're going to have to fight hard to get that money all around. This really is a mess that goes back years. That I think, more than blaming John Horgan, more than blaming Rachel Notley, whichever side you're on, this blame has to really go on to two people, Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau. That this National Energy Board process could have been handled so much better from the very start, so that it could be seen as being beyond reproach. But there have been too many times where people have been appointed to the board for various reasons that were not always the best reasons. Too many party faithful put onto these boards and these positions, rewarded for their jobs, and there are major questions about their decisions. The situation, though, is such that as much as people on the left side of the equation complain about Stephen Harper and his connections to the Alberta oil industry, being from Alberta himself, Justin Trudeau tried to campaign as himself as someone who was different. And he was doing whatever he could to say whatever he could to whatever audience would listen in 2015, and he was doing whatever he could to take away votes from the NDP, and to be the heir apparent for people who were on the right side of the equation and didn't want to vote for Harper. So he was saying a lot of things that now he realized he couldn't deliver on. And among the things that he was trying to convey, however feebly it was that it would be communities that would decide. It would be up to communities to give their social license. It would be up to governments to do the approval of the project, but it would be up to, ultimately, the communities to tell the government yes or no if it wanted a resource project in the communities. And a lot of people bought that. A lot of people in Howe Sound who were against the Woodfibre LNG bought that. A lot of people who are on both sides of Burrard Inlet and some very expensive houses who don't want to see more marine traffic go by bought that as well. And we're seeing people who are joining those protests who aren't your typical professional protesters, and we're seeing people that have flooded their local Liberal MPs and said that, wait a second, Trudeau's not delivering on his promise to give the communities the chance themselves to say yay or nay to these projects. And meanwhile, during the election, of course, late in the election, we found out that there were people from pipeline lobbyist companies who were working very closely on the Trudeau campaign. And so who was Trudeau really campaigning for? Was he just using the environmentalists to get those votes to beat the Conservatives, or was he just trying to do his best to be a kinder, gentler version of the Conservatives? I think that he's got a bit of an identity crisis there. And people like Gregor Robertson, Mayor of Vancouver, bought that hook, line, and sinker as well. He was trying to use the connections to the federal Liberals during that campaign to try to sell his ideas to stop the Kinder Morgan pipeline and the tankers. But there you go. So you've got questions on all sides of the political spectrum on this, and Trudeau running around saying that this is going to be built, and you've got people in the industry wanting him to be more emphatic on that. I think that for the good of everyone, I think what they need to do is to get this into the courts as soon as possible, get it in front of judges, let all the sides argue, put their arguments together, let Horgan have the BC government lawyers get in there and say why there should be provincial jurisdiction and why he should be pushing to protect British Columbia's interests, and get the federal government to do the same thing, and also ultimately look at this from a constitutional standpoint. What is federal, what is provincial? Let the chips finally fall. Let's get a decision so that either Kinder Morgan as a company can move on and go and build somewhere else, or they can get their shovels in the ground as soon as possible. It doesn't help anyone's interests to keep this dance going. It is pretty tiring for most of us in the middle, who, of course, we want a nice environment. We also want a nice economy that works for us all. And this rhetoric going back and forth doesn't serve anyone, especially since we're paying very high prices at the gas pumps, and we rely on lower prices for fuel to keep products from that need to go to market, that need to be taken to market by diesel and gas carrying vehicles to be reasonably priced. And if we can't rely on lower prices of transportation, then that's going to hit us in the pocketbook, even if we don't get in our cars. And of course, it's going to put stress on our public transit because buses run on diesel. This uncertainty is not helping anyone. Let's just get on with it. The rhetoric on one side is muddying too many issues, relying too much on the worries about climate change. On the other side of the equation, there's just too much rhetoric about BC harming Alberta's ability to get oil to market. Well, there is a pipeline that exists. Alberta oil is getting to where it needs to get, and I don't think anyone right now, unless they're really radical, is even considering or pushing the idea of turning off the taps and closing a pipeline. This is all about expanding a current pipeline, and we're already seeing other options put on the table, like the pipeline heading to the United States that Trump okayed last year, and there's other options too, which might be oil by rail, and there are other options that are looking at doing that in a safer fashion. It'd be nice just to get this settled in the courts once and for all, so that the rhetoric could end and we can get on with things.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin. He's the publisher of thebreaker.news, his website, thebreaker.ca. If you have any questions for Bob or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.